2 years since the controversial Brumby bill passed into law in New South Wales, and feral horse numbers in the park and its surround continue to climb to record levels, in a zone originally set aside from domestic grazing more than 50 years ago. Now the horses are clearly visible in numbers on the dry bed of the retreating Lake Yucumbene. Fifth-generation Manero sheep farmer Peter Davis has seen the whole environmental saga unfold.
The grazing was a very controversial issue in the day, but when the stock were all kicked out of the park up there, the expectation was quite clear that it was going to become a national park with the sole purpose of preserving our natural heritage. That's our native animals and the native plants. And so in that fragile environment up there, it was just a disaster. So the expectation was that the non-native animals would be kept out of the place and it'd all regenerate. And that's what happened until only a few years ago when the feral horse numbers have taken off. And I find it really upsetting and quite disappointing that the whole concept of a national park has been thrown out the window with some bizarre argument that feral horses have a place in our heritage, which is just not true.
From a much heralded end to domestic grazing in the 1970s, now he flies his light aircraft across the park and beyond, and feral horses are visible in almost every clearing.
It's been really dramatic, the change. Just in the last, say, 5 years, I used to be able to fly up there and you'd see little mobs of 6 or 8 horses and you might see 3 or 4 across the Tangtanga area. Now you fly over that area and there's mobs of 20, 30 or even more, and there's a mob there, another mob there, another mob there. As far as you can see, there are horses.
When thousands of hectares of leasehold and freehold land were resumed, he and many farmers like him had the clear understanding that all grazing by hard-hoofed animals would end in the newly minted national park.
It was proclaimed and with the idea of protecting native animals, and all the introduced grazing animals were kicked out. And a lot of people still aren't happy about that, but that was the fact. It was designed and managed for many years to look after the native animals. And it's only since this Brumby bill's come in that we've now turned that whole concept on its head. So I just can't imagine how the landowners that were kicked out of the park must feel now in seeing this place being turned into an enormous horse paddock. When we consider the current Brumby bill, introduced by Deputy Premier Barilaro, honestly, it defies logic how it even got to where it is. And there's all sorts of conjecture as to why he pursued it. But the obvious answer is to get rid of the bill. There is no reason to protect these horses. There are tens of, possibly hundreds of thousands of these animals across Australia. There's just no way that they're an endangered species, nor do they have the heritage aspects that some people claim. What's the difference? Just because they've got big brown eyes and nice fluffy ears.
Mick Gentleman, the Minister responsible for the ACT's parks and the National Capital's watershed, has confirmed a no-tolerance policy for feral horses venturing into the territory from the now 20,000 estimated horse population in the Kosciuszko Park.
Yes, we are incredibly concerned about the numbers of horses in Kosciuszko National Park. I was able to visit the park with NPA last year and had a look at the devastation that they have provided for the upper catchment of the Murrumbidgee River, which of course flows through the ACT as well. Very concerned about the numbers and the implications it could have for Namadgi National Park, Madam Speaker, and they will seek to encroach into the ACT. And we've done a lot of work in removing horses from our national park and ensuring that they don't incur again on the national park.
And the Minister, who recently visited the Murrumbidgee catchment, expressed concern about the feral horse impact on water quality on the river and its source.
Because we know the damage they do, and hooved animals do incredible damage to those very sensitive areas of our ecosystem across the top of the catchment. We have written, of course, many times to the New South Wales Government, to, of course, the Environment Minister and also Mr Barilaro, who is the key proponent of the Brumby legislation in New South Wales and ask for them to review that legislation. I've also written to the Commonwealth Environmental Minister on a number of occasions as well, outlining our concerns for feral horse encroachment into the ACT and providing them of the evidence of damage that they have done in Kosciuszko National Park.
That the Brumby laws remain on the books mystifies Kosciuszko Park supporters, including the Invasive Species Council.
Well, the horses, not only do they have the hard hooves, they have no natural predators, so the numbers just keep increasing every year. Over 1,000 are added to the population each year, and as the population grows, it gets even worse. They're covering more than half the park, they're causing this massive damage, and they're not leaving any space for the native animals. It should be the wake-up call for government to act. This is a crisis for national parks, and they need to do something about it.
It's particularly important that we control these feral horses in the Alps after this horror summer of fire. The horses are hammering the regrowth vegetation. If we want to keep healthy water catchments, then we need to reduce those horse numbers now.
And he warns that without urgent action to dramatically reduce feral horse numbers in the park, more native species may be completely wiped out.
Kosciuszko National Park was established to protect the water catchments that provide hydroelectricity and clean water to the people of southeast Australia. You can't have hard-hooved animals like feral horses and clean water, sustainable catchments, and look after our flora and fauna.
And with feral horse numbers climbing between 15 to 20% a year, claims that the recent fires have cut horse numbers have been scoffed at as nothing more than short-term political posturing.